Kimberly Turner from cookingwithkimberly.com, and today I'm going to show you how to bake a basic gluten-free tiger nut bread loaf. Now, as everyone's trying to eat a little bit healthier, and there's a lot of people out there with celiac problems, we're trying to eat a lot more gluten-free things. So in order to make a gluten-free bread, you have to use gluten-free flour, and that's why we're using Tiger Nuts flour today. Now you can check out Tiger Nuts products online at tigernutsusa.com, and I'll show you what this flour is about. And I'm also using their Tiger Nuts oil. Make sure you check out both of those reviews so you know a little bit more about what the heck that is. Now, these are tiger nuts, and tiger nuts actually aren't nuts at all. They're little tubers that grow under the ground. These guys look like little wrinkly chickpeas. They're dried, these ones. So you can check out my review on these, and they're from Tiger Nuts as well, and you can snack on those. But they're little tubers. They grow like carrots or potatoes or anything kind of root vegetables like that. They're nut-free, they're gluten-free, dairy-free, they're vegetarian, vegan, organic, non-GMO, pesticide-free. They have a beautiful resistant starch in them that are just great for weight loss. Also, the starch is going to kind of help interact with all these ingredients and help this bread rise, because that's your biggest issue with gluten-free breads, is to help that rise. Because flours that have gluten in them, you can put yeast and other things in, and they'll start making bubbles and it'll expand, and that's what you see, the little spongy bubbles in your bread, and that's what makes it rise. So a lot of gluten-free breads are either very dense or they don't rise at all, and you kind of have a real hard time. As long as you are dealing with proper proportions of things and kind of using your brain, you can substitute out different kinds of gluten-free flours and things like that to make a lovely bread. So Tiger Nuts flour, this is the flour, are these little beautiful dried tiger nuts. So to me and Mom as well, these little tiger nuts have a little bit of a coconutty flavor, and what they've done is they've just taken those whole dried tiger nuts and ground them into a beautiful fine flour. Now I did sift this just to make sure, to help it rise a little bit and make sure that there's no lumps or clumps. To do is proof our yeast. Make sure that it's active and it's alive, and get it started before we start adding it to our mixture. I have 1 cup of milk here and a 1/2 cup of water. Now you could use all water, you could use all milk, you could use any combination of what you want, or another milk product. In other words, you could use an evaporated milk or a dried milk powder mixed with water, whatever you feel like. Or you could check out my show for how to make Tiger Nuts milk, and you could use Tiger Nuts milk specifically for a bread like this, and make sure that it's dairy-free or whatever. So whatever your dietary, restrictions are, you can kind of mix and match ingredients and kind of substitute things in. So I'm using 1 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of water. I'm going to scald it. Check out my show for how to scald milk for baking. Basically, scalding is kind of an old school thing. They used to do that when milk was not pasteurized. However, right now I'm doing it because it's going to heat up the milk a little bit and get things started, keep things nice and warm for this bread to help it start moving and get active, okay? So I'm gonna put this in the microwave. You could also do it on the stove top if you want. You don't wanna bring it to the boil, but you do want to heat it, okay? So I'm gonna put it in there for maybe a minute. Next, I have 2½ teaspoons of active dry yeast. I'm actually using a quick rise because this is going to be a very quick rise. Some gluten-free breads require you to let it rise all night long. This is 20 to 30 minutes of rise time. That's it. So hopefully this will go a lot quicker for you. 2½ teaspoons of that. And then we're going to use some honey in the milk, probably 3 to 4 tablespoons. Now you could use agave nectar or stevia. If you are fine with using sugar, you may use sugar or brown sugar. You could even use molasses if you wanted to. Some kind of sweetener. Yeast needs to eat something, and it likes sugars. So I'm going to give it something to eat and make sure that it's getting moving. Now, if your yeast doesn't bloom, that means it is dead. You need to go buy some new yeast. So if it doesn't start making bubbles and things, it's not right. Okay, this is just above body temperature, and that's exactly what I want. So I am going to add 3 to 4 tablespoons of honey to this milk, and I'm going to stir it through. Stir that into the milk, make sure it's nice and dissolved, whatever kind of sweetener you're using. And we can mix the yeast right directly in this container. Okay, that's in. In goes my yeast. Stir that in a little bit. And we're gonna let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes or until it starts to bloom, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a little while. Keep that in a nice warm place or cover it with a tea towel to keep it warm. Okay, I am using 1.5 cups of Tiger Nuts flour, and it's sifted. And I'm going to just combine my dry ingredients in a small bowl. Now you could use all Tiger Nuts flour if you wanted to, but when I do gluten-free breads, I do like to kind of mix a little bit of other flour in there just to kind of give it a good base and balance. So you could use tapioca flour or chickpea flour, arrowroot flour, something like that. I'm using 1/2 cup of arrowroot flour today. That has a nice light texture, something like cornstarch, actually, okay? You could even use potato starch in gluten-free bread recipes, but the Tiger Nuts have a gorgeous starch in there. It's nice and sweet, actually, and that's the one that helps with weight loss as well. So we have quite a bit of starch in here. I'm not worried about that. And I'm using 1/2 cup of chickpea flour as well. It's nice and light and fluffy. And that's all nut-free stuff and all gluten-free as well. Again, you could use all Tiger Nuts flour if you wanted to, but I'm just lightening it up a little bit. So just kind of stir that through. We want things to be sort of evenly combined so you don't have just pockets of one thing or the other. I have 1 teaspoon of salt. Use a fine salt, not a large chunk. I have 4 teaspoons of baking powder, not soda. I sifted that as well to make sure there's no lumps or clumps. And in a lot of gluten-free breads, we use something called gum. Now you could use a xanthan gum or a guar gum. You can find these things in your grocery store sometimes, or you can go to a bulk store and they often tend to have that. So I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of xanthan gum and 1 teaspoon of guar gum, but you could use one or the other or any kind of combination of both of those. That's going to help kind of make the gum, kind of make it kind of glutinous. And instead of using gluten flour, this is going to help kind of create those bubbles for us. Form those bubbles, really. Okay, now stir that through so you have kind of an even mixture going on here. If you want to add some seeds to this, feel free. Seeds that I would suggest would be something like a chia seed, and that absorbs a nice amount of flour and kind of has a little bit of a gelatinous feel when it gets wet, so it will combine with your wet ingredients nicely. Or you could use a flax seed or a poppy seed, something like that, to help maintain structure. Today I'm just showing you the most basic bread, nice healthy gluten-free nut-free bread. So here is my flour mixture going on, nice and evenly combined. So I'm using a standing mixer today. You don't have to. You could do this by hand and that would be no problem. You could also use a hand mixer if you want to. This is just going to kind of make my life a little bit easier today. So I'm going to combine my wet ingredients minus the yeast that's still proofing, and it's doing a beautiful job. It's already started to bloom nicely. Try and have your wet ingredients room temperature before you start. So take your eggs out a little bit early as well. So I have 2 large eggs here. That's also going to help with things rising. I have 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar, or you could use lemon juice or lime juice. And I have 1/4 cup of Tiger Nuts oil. Now, this is the oil that I'm using. This is a first press extra virgin Tiger Nuts oil. It's these beautiful Tiger Nuts that I showed you earlier, and they just press them and extract the oil from them. Now, if you don't have Tiger Nuts oil, you could always use another oil. You could use a coconut oil that maybe is room temperature, that's more liquid at this time, or heat it up just slightly. You could use olive oil or whatever it is that you prefer to use. Also, if you want to, before we start adding dry ingredients to all of this, and you have this mixed through, you could add spices to this. You could make it an herb bread if you want to, and add dried spices like parsley and rosemary, thyme, oregano, or something like that. You could even make it with onion powder, garlic powder, or even desiccate dried onions or garlic. or you can make it a nice sweet bread and add cinnamon or nutmeg or cloves or anything of that nature and make it kind of a nice warm spiced bread. So today I'm using the paddle attachment, and I'm just going to go for a couple seconds and easily combine these wet ingredients before I add my yeast mixture. There you go. You just want to make sure that the eggs are broken up and kind of whipped a little bit as well. Let me show you what active yeast looks like. It is bloomed here. It looks beautiful. It's all puffy. You will know if your yeast is alive. It's alive. Look at it, all foamy and puffy. It has risen like this far above the liquid. So that's ready to go, okay? So add this to your wet ingredients in the mixer. And this is gonna be just an easy, quick mix, couple seconds, just to combine it evenly before we start adding the dry ingredients. Make sure you get all that yeast because that's going to rise that beautiful bread you've got going. And boy, that is the smell of fresh bread.
Oh, I love that smell, Kim.
You smell the yeast?
Yeah.
It's not the most pleasant smell, but it reminds you that you're making fresh bread, and that is just something out of this world. So let's just combine this quickly. That's it, just that quickly, okay? Okay, so that's nice and combined. We just want to make sure it's combined before we start adding the yeast mixture. Now we're going to make 1 loaf out of this recipe. If you want to make 2 loaves or 3 loaves or whatever, you need to mix things separately. You can't just double the batch and expect it to work. It's not always going to work like that. So best to take precaution and just do them 1 batch at a time. Now you can either grease up your pan, spray your pan with nonstick spray, or grease it and flour it. I'm just going to use a little bit of the tiger nuts oil, and I'm going to grease it up that way with a basting brush. Just make sure it's nice and greased up, okay? Also, you may have noticed that I have a little one on the way. I also use the tiger nuts oil to help prevent my stretch marks. And I mean, my belly looks in pristine condition right now, especially considering it's my first child. That's when you get the most stretch marks. I have no stretch marks and I'm almost ready to deliver. So the tiger nuts oil does a beautiful job at really hydrating. So check out my show I actually did on that and explained a little bit more about using the tiger nuts oil on your skin for beauty and for stretch marks purposes. So if you remember, we have roughly 3 cups of flour here. I'm going to add maybe 1/3 of it at a time to our wet ingredients here. Quickly combine it and then add more. Quickly combine it and add the rest, okay? And this is going to be mixed on a medium-high speed for about 3 minutes. That's it. Start on low while you're still adding the dry ingredients. If you need to make sure that there's none stuck on the top of the hook before you start letting it go, do that. Also, just to prelude things, you might be expecting this to look like other doughs. This is not regular bread dough. This is a gluten-free bread dough. It is going to be different. This is going to be more of a batter, almost like a quick bread batter. So it's going to be wet and thick and sticky, okay? But don't fret, that's the way it's supposed to be. 3 minutes, let's go. Medium high. All right, that's 3 minutes. Now, we are going to preheat our oven to 375 degrees. This is only going to proof for 20 to 30 minutes, and you're going to do it on top of your preheating stove. So let's get going here. Remove that hook, the paddle. Now this is wet and sticky, but it is the way it's supposed to be. So scrape that off of your paddle. You don't want to waste any of this dough. Also, with gluten-free breads, and they're rising, you do not want to pound these down as though it's a regular glutinous flour dough. When you pound down the bubbles out of a glutinous bread dough, they just keep rising. But you only have 1 chance with the gluten-free dough, so don't do that, okay? You want to leave it. As for this particular bread, you do not want this to crest above the baking pan before you put it in the oven. It's going to finish doing all it needs to do in the oven. It's going to finish rising. So make sure that it doesn't go that high. If it goes that high, it's ready to go in. Put it in right away, okay? Don't just leave it. Okay, so this is even stickier and wetter than, say, a cookie dough, okay? So that's what we have going on here. But I can kind of feel that the bubbles are starting with the yeast. Although it's thick and sticky and wet, it does feel like it's lightening up already. Now, with this bread, it's not gonna smooth its own self out on the top. So before you let it rise, you're gonna wanna either use a spatula or your fingers wetted to just even out the top of this dough so it's a little more aesthetically pleasing. You want it to look like a sandwich bread, right? Regular loaf. Don't fret, all is well. So I'm just going to quickly and easily kind of push it out to the sides so that it's even, and then I'm going to finish it up with some wet fingers. Do the best you can with the spatula. Smooth that out, okay? You don't want it to be in a drafty area, so if your kitchen is particularly cold, in other words, if it's winter, or it's drafty, you have a window open or a door open, just try and minimize that. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it with the same towel I covered my yeast with. A little bit of water on your hands is going to keep this dough from sticking to you. So go ahead, use water on your fingers, and just try and smooth out the top of this loaf a little bit better. And that works wonders. A little bit extra water isn't going to do anything bad to it. It's also going to help it crisp up on the top. So all is well in your world. This is wonderful. It's a lovely, lovely dough. Again, I use the quick rise yeast, and we're only going to rise for a little while here. So this is a much quicker gluten-free bread than a lot of them are. So here's what we've got. A wet, sticky dough that I've smoothed out nicely, okay? Onto your stove top while the oven is preheating, cover it up, keep it from getting a draft. 20 to 30 minutes, that's it. Don't let it go above this level, okay? That's it. This bread has risen nicely. I would say it's risen at least an inch. Look at that. It's almost to the top. Time to go in. This has been 25 minutes. So in it goes for 35 to 45 minutes on 375. Now, you don't want any kind of baking rack coming close to the top because it'll make it too hot and it'll burn it. If you see that the top is starting to get too browned, put a tent of aluminum foil on top of it. Not tightly, but just loosely. Also, you can use your digital thermometer near the end if you're questioning whether it's done or not. With gluten-free breads, you want to make sure it's between 210 and 220 near the middle to the bottom of the, you don't want to go all the way to the bottom of the pan and read the temperature of the pan, but you want to make sure that that's the temperature that you're working with, and you'll know also that it's done, okay? In this goes. It's going to be awesome. I'm just over 30 minutes and it's nice and browned. I did put an aluminum tent on top, aluminum foil tent. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and I'm going to take a quick thermometer reading to make sure that we're where we need to be. And if not, I still have a few more minutes to put it back in. So it did the remainder of its rising in the oven and it looks beautiful. The top is domed and perfect. Look at that. What a gorgeous loaf of bread. So now we got to be quick because if it needs to go back in, you don't want it to lose too much of its heat. So let's take a quick reading. I'm going to put it through the center, somewhere inconspicuous, and try and get a reading, not to all the way to the bottom, but maybe almost to the bottom. And I'm glad I did that because it's not quite where I need it to be. It's at almost 190. So back in, it's got to go to 210 to 220. Covering it back up with the tent as well, and you'll see it in just a few more minutes. Can't wait. Okay, that's another 10 minutes. Let's see if that did the trick. Oftentimes, if you use the skewer test like you do with regular bread, with a gluten-free bread, it doesn't read properly. It'll come out looking clean, but it won't be the right temperature. Here we are. We're right between 210 and 220. I'm at about 213. This bread is done like dinner. I'm gonna let this sit for only 1 to 2, 3 minutes maximum. Then I need to turn it on its side. We need to get it out of this. You don't want it to cool in the pan. This has to come out. So leave it for just a few minutes and you'll see me then. So we've got this gorgeous, gorgeous sandwich loaf, and we're going to turn it on its side and see if we can't shimmy it out of here. Okay? I might just have to cut around the edges to make sure, because I don't want to leave her in here too long. Okay. Moment of truth, right? If you can't get it out right away, I'm just gonna leave it on its side for a few minutes and let it go that way and try it again. I don't want to rip the bottom or anything like that, so you'll see me in a couple minutes again. Okay, she's released from the bottom now that it's cooled just a little bit more. And I'm going to try and gently pull it out on its side for just a few more minutes. There we go. Okay. Okay, so this is what the loaf looks like pulled out of that. And now you have to wait until it's completely cooled before you try and slice this. That's gonna take between 45 minutes to an hour, and then you're gonna use a nice serrated knife to cut slices. So you'll see me then. Okay, this bread is finally cooled. I have a nice cutting board here, and we're gonna cut a couple slices off. Are you ready to try it, Mom?
Absolutely.
It's lovely and soft. It's very easy to cut. Look at this gorgeous bread inside. It looks just like a glutinous bread. It has beautiful bubbles. See that? Nice, a nice sponge. It's light and fluffier, lighter and fluffier than you would think also as well. Mom, do you want the end piece?
It doesn't matter. All of it looks good to me. And it smells like heaven.
It's slicing beautifully. A nice, look at, nice thin slice holding together beautifully as well. So here we go. You want some butter?
Yes, please.
Now you could use a nice sweet cream butter if you wanted to with this. Or a flavored butter, an herbed butter. Okay, now I'm gonna cut myself a slice, and I'm gonna show you a typical thin slice as though it was sandwich bread, right? Just so you can see. This turned out beautifully. Look at this bread. You will be very, very pleased. And don't be scared that it looks like batter, because it rose just fine, and it finished rising, and it baked up just lovely. And look at that sponge. Look at that. So fresh. Well, Mom, what do you think of the flavor?
It is absolutely divine.
Yeah? You like that? You would you bake that often?
Yes.
Nice.
I mean, you know that I appreciate good bread. And I like to bake it. This is really good. This is a winner, Kim.
That's really good bread.
It is so delicious and so moist.
And look at how it's staying together. Just like a nice piece of regularly sliced sandwich bread.
Yep.
Awesome. Completely gluten-free. Might just be the healthiest bread you've ever baked.
And so delicious.
Moist. Beautiful. Look at this gorgeous loaf. Awesome. So that's how you do it. That's how you bake a basic gluten-free Tiger Nuts bread loaf. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love Tiger Nuts products. Make sure you check them out online at Tiger Nuts USA for the flour, for the oil, for the whole Tiger Nuts as well. They're divine. They also have a beautiful smoothie mix. Amazing, amazing products. And that's it. Follow me on Twitter at Cooking with Kim E with a capital E. Like the fan page at facebook.com/cookingwithkimberly. My shows are on iFood TV at my.fossum.tv/cookingwithkimberly. My shows are on youtube.com/cookingwithkimberly. I have a channel on Roku, Cooking with Kimberly, and I'm also syndicated on Apple TV and Amazon and a few other places. Come to my website at cookingwithkimberly.com and subscribe. Interact with us and let us know what's going on in your culinary world, all right? Be a champion in your kitchen and eat deliciously. Bye.
Oh, this is good.
Oh, I'm glad you like it, Mom.